I need to tell you about the strangest 48 hours of my professional life. The ones that started with a woman telling the entire office she hated me and ended with her asking me to drive her home like none of that had happened at all. My name's Marcus Hale. I'm 31. I work as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company, the kind of place with too many Slack channels and a break room coffee machine that's been broken since before I started. Up until that week, my job had been comfortable in the most boring way possible. I showed up, did good work, kept my head down, and went home. Nobody had strong feelings about me, one way or the other. That was the plan, honestly. Be reliable, be invisible, collect a paycheck. Then, Priya started. She came in on a Monday, transferred over from our Chicago office, and within about 3 hours, half the floor had already decided she was either going to be the best thing to happen to our department or the most exhausting. Sharp, fast-talking, the kind of person who asks a question in a meeting that makes everyone else realize they hadn't actually understood the problem they were trying to solve. I liked her immediately, in the low-key way you like a new coworker who's clearly going to make the job more interesting. Apparently, the feeling wasn't mutual. I found this out on Wednesday, 2 days into her being there, when my friend Devin caught me by the printer looking like he was holding information he didn't know how to deliver gently. "Hey," he said, "you should probably know what Priya's been saying." "About what?" "About you." That got my attention. "What is it?" "She told a few people in the break room that she hated working near you. Said you talk too much during status calls. Said you take credit for things in a way that's, and I'm quoting her here, low-key insufferable." I stood there for a second, just absorbing that, because it didn't match anything I'd experienced. We'd had maybe 4 conversations total, all of them normal, professional, nothing that should have generated that kind of reaction. "That's it? No context?" "That's what I heard. Sorry, man. I figured you'd want to know before you walked into the next meeting clueless." I appreciated that, even though it didn't make the rest of the day any easier. I kept replaying our interactions, trying to find the moment I'd apparently been insufferable in, and coming up empty. By Thursday morning, it had spread enough that a couple of other people were giving me that careful, slightly amused look coworkers give you when they know something about your reputation that you don't. I decided I wasn't going to make it weird. I'm not the confrontational type, never have been, so my plan was simple. Be normal, be professional, let it blow over. If she had a problem with me, fine. I'd let her bring it up instead of cornering her about office gossip like a teenager. Then Thursday afternoon happened. We had a department meeting that ran long, the kind where half the agenda is just people restating things that were already in the email. Priya sat 2 seats down from me, sharp as always, asking the questions nobody else wanted to ask. At one point, I made a comment about a timeline adjustment. Nothing controversial, just logistics, and she shot it down fast and a little too pointed for the room. "That doesn't actually work," she said. "We tried something similar in Chicago, and it fell apart in week 2. "Fair," I said. "I'm open to a better option." She didn't offer one. She just moved on to the next agenda item like the exchange hadn't happened, and I felt the room notice the temperature of it, the way rooms do when something small but charged just occurred, and everyone's deciding whether to acknowledge it. After the meeting broke up, people filtered out slowly, and I found myself gathering my laptop at the same pace as Priya, which meant we ended up walking toward the elevator at the same time, alone, the first real one-on-one moment we'd had all week. I figured this was either going to be very awkward or it was going to clear the air. I didn't expect what actually happened. "Can I ask you something?" she said, hitting the elevator button. "Sure." "Did Devin tell you what I supposedly said about you?" I hesitated for a second, weighing whether lying would make this easier. It wouldn't have. "Yeah, he did." She nodded slowly, like she'd already known the answer and was just confirming it. "Good, that makes this less complicated." Less complicated than what? The elevator doors opened. We stepped in together, and she pressed the lobby button before continuing. "I didn't say I hated you because of anything you did," she said. "I said it because I needed people to stop watching how I act around you." I stared at her, genuinely confused. "I'm going to need more than that." She crossed her arms, looking at the elevator doors instead of at me, like it was easier to say this way. 3 days into a new job in a new office, I noticed I kept finding excuses to talk to one specific coworker. That's not a great look when you're trying to establish yourself as someone people take seriously. So I did the dumbest possible thing and decided the easiest fix was to make it look like the opposite was true. The elevator kept descending. I didn't say anything for a second, just trying to catch up to what she'd actually told me. "So you told people you hated me," I said slowly, "because you didn't want them to notice you liked me." When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane. "I know," she said, and for the first time since she'd started, I saw something crack in that sharp, fast-talking exterior, something almost embarrassed. I panicked. I'm new. I don't know anyone, and the last thing I wanted in week 1 was to become office gossip because I was being too obvious about something I hadn't even figured out myself yet. The elevator hit the lobby, doors opening onto the after-work crowd heading for the exits. Neither of us moved right away. "So, the comment in the meeting," I said, "about the timeline." "Overcorrecting," she admitted. "I shut it down harder than I needed to because I was scared I'd been too friendly with you in the hallway that morning and somebody would notice." I laughed, not because it was funny exactly, but because the whole thing was so much more human than anything I'd built it up to be in my head. "You do realize that's a worse strategy than just being normal." "I'm aware. Hindsight's doing a lot of work right now." We finally stepped out of the elevator into the lobby, and she paused near the entrance, checking her phone, then looking back at me with an expression that was somewhere between embarrassed and genuinely asking for something. "My car's in the shop," she said. "I was going to call a rideshare, but it's surge pricing because apparently every event in this city happens at 5:30 on a Thursday. And I know this is a strange thing to ask given everything I just admitted to you in an elevator, but would you mind driving me home?" I looked at her for a second, genuinely trying to figure out if this was some kind of test, some second layer of whatever strategy she'd been running all week. But her face wasn't doing anything calculated. It was just tired, a little raw from admitting something she clearly hadn't planned on admitting, asking a question because she actually needed the favor. "Yeah," I said. "I can drive you home." "You're allowed to say no, after everything." "I know I'm allowed to. I'm saying yes anyway." She studied me for a second, like she was deciding whether to be relieved or more nervous. "Okay, thank you." My car was a few blocks from the building, in the lot I always parked in because it was cheaper than the garage attached to the office. We walked there mostly in silence, the kind that isn't uncomfortable so much as loaded, both of us aware that something had shifted in the last 10 minutes that neither of us had a script for. Once we were in the car, seatbelts on, me pulling out of the lot into the early evening traffic, she finally broke the quiet. "You're allowed to be mad," she said. I would be. "I'm not mad. I'm confused. Those are different." "Fair. Can I ask you something now?" I said. "Seems fair, given the last 20 minutes. Why me? Out of everyone in that office, why did 3 days turn into noticing me specifically?" She was quiet for a second, looking out the window at the city sliding by. "Because you didn't perform for the new person," she said eventually. "Everyone else spent the first 2 days either ignoring me or being weirdly over-friendly, trying to figure out where I fit in the office hierarchy. You just talked to me like I was already a coworker instead of an event. That's rare. Most people can't help making it a thing when someone new shows up." "I didn't even realize I was doing anything." "That's exactly why it worked," she said. "If you'd been trying, I would have clocked it in a day and ignored it. The fact that you weren't trying is what got under my skin." I let that sit for a second, navigating around a slow-moving delivery truck. "So instead of, I don't know, just being normal back, you decided to torch the whole thing publicly." When you say it like that, it sounds even worse. I'm not trying to make it sound bad. I'm trying to understand the logic. "There wasn't logic," she admitted. "There was panic wearing logic's clothes. I've done this before, gotten attached too fast to someone in a new environment, And it always turns into this whole thing where people start treating you like a storyline instead of a coworker. I didn't want that happening again 3 days into a new job, so I overcorrected in the worst possible direction by making me the villain of the week. By making myself look like I had zero interest in you. Yeah, in hindsight, I could have just been quiet about it. I didn't have to recruit half the break room. I almost laughed again, but something about the rawness in her voice kept it from coming out as anything but soft. For what it's worth, it worked a little too well. I spent 2 days thinking I'd done something genuinely terrible. I know, she said. I saw your face in that meeting. That's actually what made me decide to tell you the truth instead of just letting it fade out quietly. What changed? She turned to look at me instead of out the window. You didn't get defensive. You didn't try to fix it by being extra nice or extra distant. You just kept being exactly the same amount of normal you'd always been, even after people told you I supposedly hated you. That's not what insecure people do. That's what people do when they actually know who they are. I felt something in my chest shift hearing that, the same way it had with Nora months back, this strange recognition of being seen clearly by someone who'd had every reason to just stay vague about it. We hit a red light, and I glanced over at her properly for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. So where does this leave us? Because I feel like I just got handed information I don't totally know what to do with. Honestly, she said, I don't know either. I just know I didn't want to keep pretending around you. That felt worse than the awkwardness of telling you the truth. Even though the truth makes you look a little unhinged. Especially because of that, she said. If I was going to be honest, I wanted to be honest about the actually embarrassing part, not some softened version of it. The light turned green. I pulled forward, and for a few blocks, neither of us said anything, just letting the conversation breathe instead of rushing to fill it the way people usually do when something's gotten too real too fast. Can I tell you something? I said eventually. You've told me plenty tonight. Why stop now? I almost didn't say anything to you in that elevator. I had about 4 different versions of staying quiet lined up, just nodding along, getting you home, letting it be weird forever. What stopped you? Same thing that's apparently been your whole problem all week. I didn't want to perform around you either. If I was going to talk to you again after everything, I wanted it to actually mean something, not just be polite damage control. She was quiet for a second, and when I glanced over, her expression had softened into something I hadn't seen from her yet. None of the sharpness from the meeting room, none of the panic from the elevator, just something steady and a little surprised. That's annoyingly similar to what I just told you, she said. I noticed. We pulled up outside her apartment building a few minutes later, one of those newer complexes with a courtyard out front and too many identical balconies. I put the car in park, and neither of us moved right away, the engine humming low between us. So, she said, what happens at the office tomorrow? I don't know. What do you want to happen? I want to stop pretending I hate you. That seems like a reasonable first step. That's a low bar, but I'll take it. And maybe, she added, slower now, I'd like to actually find out if the thing I panicked about is worth panicking about, properly, not through gossip and overcorrected meeting comments. You're asking me out. I'm asking you to get dinner with me, outside the office, where nobody's deciding whether we're a storyline before we've even figured it out ourselves. I smiled, probably wider than the moment strictly called for. Yeah, I'd like that. Good, she said, reaching for the door handle, then pausing. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the break room thing. That was genuinely a bad call. You already apologized in the elevator. I know. I just wanted to say it again outside of a moving metaphor. I laughed, and she smiled, actually smiled, the first uncomplicated one I'd seen from her all week. Thanks for the ride home, she said, and for not being weird about any of this. I reserve the right to be a little weird about it tomorrow. Fair. I'd be disappointed if you weren't. She got out, and I watched her walk up to the building entrance, that same sharp confidence from the meeting room back in her step. except now it didn't feel like something aimed at keeping people at a distance. It felt like just who she was. The next morning at the office was strange in the best possible way. Devin caught me by the printer again, this time looking even more confused than before. "Okay," he said. "Priya just told 3 people in the break room that she was, and I'm quoting again, completely wrong about you. What happened?" "Long story. You drove her home last night. People saw your car." "Even longer story." He studied me for a second, clearly putting pieces together that weren't quite landing yet. "Are you two?" "We're getting dinner Friday," I said, and left it at that, because some things don't need an audience to be real. They just need to actually happen. Dinner Friday turned into dinner the following week, then a weekend trip to a farmer's market that neither of us actually needed anything from, then 6 months of slowly stopping the performance neither of us had needed in the first place. She told me later that the reason she'd finally told me the truth in that elevator wasn't bravery exactly. It was that watching me stay steady through 2 days of being publicly disliked for no real reason had made her realize that whatever she'd been protecting herself from by lying wasn't actually a risk worth taking. The risk had been pretending. The honesty turned out to be the easy part. I think about that ride home a lot, the quiet, the traffic, the way she finally said the thing she'd been avoiding saying for 3 days because the alternative had started to feel heavier than the truth. People do strange, overcorrected things when they're scared of being seen too clearly too fast. I get that now in a way I didn't before. Sometimes the loudest version of someone pushing you away is just a person who noticed something real and panicked before they figured out what to do with it. We've been together a year and a half now. Devin still brings up the break room thing every chance he gets, mostly because he loves telling new hires the story like it's office folklore. Priya still corrects him every time. She didn't hate me, she tells people now. She was just bad at admitting the opposite for about 3 days, until a car ride made it impossible to keep pretending. Looking back, I think that's the part that stuck with me most. Not that someone lied about hating me, because honestly, in the moment, that part stung plenty. But that underneath the lie was something a lot more human than I expected. Somebody scared of being too obvious about caring, doing the clumsiest possible thing to cover it up, and then choosing honesty the second the moment actually mattered. I almost let 2 days of confusion turn into permanent distance. I'm glad I didn't get defensive enough to close that door before she had the chance to tell me the truth. So tell me, if a coworker told the whole office they hated you, and then turned around and asked for a favor that same night, what would you have done? Would you have said no out of pride, or said yes and found out what was actually going on underneath it? And have you ever had someone push you away hardest right before they were about to let you in? Let me know down in the comments. And if this one got you, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.